share about. I started last week talking about the practice of giving, and then on Tuesday I talked about the practice of moral discipline or ethical discipline, and then I wanted today to talk about the practice of patience. So there's a set of six practices that is a condensation of all of the kinds of training activities that we can do in our daily life, and sort of a broad superset of different ways of training our mind. So these six activities: giving, ethical discipline, patience, effort, joyful effort, concentration, and wisdom. And that together, there's tons of practices that go into them, but they all kind of help us to change our mind in different ways. So the the first three of these, giving, moral discipline, patience, they help us to build they help us to build the strength of mind. From one point of view, yeah, there's a number of angles you can take on them, but there's a tendency for our mind to want to take all the best stuff for ourselves. Like, this is the natural tendency to acquire that I was talking about last week. And giving opposes that. It's a mind that loosens up, opens up, wants to benefit others, reverses that movement. I talked on Tuesday about ethical discipline because there's a natural tendency for our mind to just do whatever it wants to do, like do whatever we feel like, regardless of the consequences on others and so forth. So when we're opposing that tendency, that we're training at that time in this ethical discipline. And the practice of patience, naturally, when we encounter anything unpleasant, anything we don't like, we tend to become unhappy. When we become unhappy, we tend to become angry. There's a part of our mind that's just kind of pushing away all the bad stuff, right? And these are broad themes, of course, but we spend our life basically trying to gather all the good stuff, push away all the bad stuff, and do whatever the heck we want. That is our default mode. But the thing is that there's some problems with that, many challenges that arise with that. And so I wanted to talk about patience in particular, about this tendency to want to reject all the things we don't like, and in particular the tendency to become angry, and that natural tendency. But what we can do to begin to challenge that in our own mind, or begin to, not so much, maybe to challenge it, maybe just to unwind it a little bit, like just unwinding our reactions in that direction. So we can begin as usual with some meditation, but in the meditation, what we can do is pay particular attention to unpleasant things, discomforts, and so forth, and look at our natural reaction to these things, and spend a bit of time getting familiar with that in our own experience. So, as usual, for our meditation, we can sit back upright but relaxed. And take a deep breath in and out just to reset. And another breath, just inviting ourselves to relax. And another breath, just asking ourselves what is important now. So we can begin to become more aware of the feelings, the sensations in our body, to help to ground and anchor our mind, prevent our mind from just wandering off. We pay attention to our body. Our body has a mind of its own. Most of the activity in our body is unconscious, but we can just begin to become more conscious of that. Just tap into the experience, feelings inside our body, especially the rhythm of our breath. And all of our feelings in our body or mind, any kind of feelings, we can group into three categories: pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feelings. So probably in our body, there are some unpleasant feelings, some discomforts, as well as perhaps some pleasant feelings. We just recognize the broad mix. We can see things that are pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, hear unpleasant sounds, pleasant sounds, and so forth. Think of unpleasant things, pleasant things. All of our feelings are polarized in this way. And we're constantly bumping up against things that are unpleasant. Every day, again and again, small and large, unpleasant things we bump into, we experience. Normally, when we encounter things we find unpleasant, we become unhappy. It's easy for us to become unhappy. But we can recognize there's a difference between encountering something unpleasant and feeling unhappy about it. We bring to mind a time when we were unhappy and just reflect on what triggered that. If it's too strong, just tread lightly. But if we can, just bring to mind something. It can be small, something that made us a bit unhappy. Just notice this tendency. What was it that triggered that feeling of unhappiness? What was that unpleasant encounter? And when we become unhappy, it's also quite natural for us to ruminate on that thing that made us unhappy, to chew on it, to turn it over again and again, thinking about it. It's very easy for us to become angry. So we can bring to mind a time when we felt angry. This feeling in our heart, wishing to harm, to get back at someone or something that we feel harmed us. And notice that there can be an obsessive quality to anger. We hold on to it. It strengthens, it grows stronger over time. The more we think about whatever made us angry. But if we think about the initial seed of that, the unpleasant experience, it may just have been a few words, whatever was the initial unpleasant experience. It's often much shorter and smaller than the anger that it gives rise to. Notice that even though the original cause of our anger may have passed, the anger can linger. Apparently, it's with us even now. Even now, we can bring to mind that anger. The other person, whatever situation made us angry, that has already passed. If it was a person, they may be perfectly happy now, but we're still angry. Or we can still be angry. There can still be anger in our mind. Eating away at our inner peace, destroying our happiness, causing us stress, making us want to get back at whoever it is we thought harmed us. The world may have moved on, but our anger has not. So we can ask, who is our anger hurting? Or who is our anger helping? Does our anger undo what happened? Does our anger give us productive, positive ideas about how to help others? If you were holding on to a burning coal, what would you do? You would just drop it. If you're holding on to the burning coal of anger, why? Is it helping? Does it make you feel better? And so we can think in our quest to stop harming, stop causing harm, the first person we need to stop harming is ourselves. One of the easiest ways we can stop harming ourselves is to let go of resentment, let go of anger about things in the past. Letting go of anger doesn't mean that we don't have a wish to protect others. Doesn't mean that we don't have a wish to help, to work hard to solve problems. It means we can do so without a heavy heart, without this dark force in our heart. And then we can make a determination to recognize anger and unhappiness, its cause, in our heart, and to skillfully allow ourselves to let that anger go whenever it arises. And with that strong, good determination, we can open our eyes and arise from meditation. Okay. So now you know you can meditate on anger. There's a wide variety of different meditations you can do. What is in the meditation, I was thinking about these situations where people, have caused harm to others, and then we maybe, or harm to us, harm to others. We feel often that our anger is justified. Normally, we always think our opinions are justified, our feelings are justified, that we wouldn't hold them if we didn't think they were justified. So the default is to assume that whatever we're thinking and doing is justified. But people's behavior can reveal things about the way they think and the beliefs they hold and their tendencies and so forth. And so the events that tend to trigger anger, they tend to be like events. An event is a superficial thing. It's like if there's a root network below the ground or seeds below the ground, and then a plant springs up, that has emerged from below the surface. So there are events of people doing things, saying things that may have made us angry. There may be tendencies that they have that will cause similar problems in the future. So we're not meaning to deny that there are people who have very harmful tendencies that we need to be guarded against, cautious against, protect against in different ways. Help those people to overcome those tendencies. But anger tends to focus on, anyway, the anger always has this threefold way of arising. There's a trigger, there's something unpleasant happens, some trigger. Then there is the mental unhappiness that we develop in response to that. So you can have an unpleasant feeling, like let's say somebody sticks you in the arm with a needle, like, ow, what is that? Then you naturally have a negative response to that. But if they were giving you a vaccination, you might have a very grateful response, right? So it's all very circumstantial. That same unpleasant feeling of a needle in your arm can trigger very different mental feelings. So the mental feeling of unhappiness is, some time back, I gave this piece of advice: always rely upon a happy mind, or rely only on a happy mind. So because an unhappy mind is unreliable, unhappy minds will tend to make us squirm and angry and so forth. So that things that are stimulating our mental unhappiness, they're a breeding ground, especially for anger. And this is the threefold evolution of anger. Some unpleasant stimulus, mental unhappiness, and then we dwell on it, and we do what's called inappropriate attention. Inappropriate attention means where we're paying attention to that situation or the person or the negative qualities of the person, and it drowns out anything else, and it causes this mind of anger to arise and to mature and to develop. And the mind of anger itself is a mind that wishes to harm. That is the sort of nature of anger. It's a mind that wishes to harm. So if you're having a mind that is kind of like anger, but not quite wishing to harm yet, that's just not fully developed anger. So, but fully ripened, fully matured anger always has this wish to harm. I'm even using my fists here. So, all of our all of these disturbing states of mind, like anger, we could call them delusions. They're they're all based on they're all nurtured by what's called inappropriate attention. Inappropriate attention means paying attention to things in such a way that the result is our mind being disturbed. So you can pay attention. So we look around a room, what are you paying attention to? Things that uplift your mind, make your mind happy and so forth, or things that are wrong, right? The room's too small. I don't like the color on the paint of the walls, etc. You can pay attention to anything or anyone and focus on their good qualities, or you can focus on their faults. There's no single person who doesn't have some faults you could focus on. There's no single person that doesn't have some good qualities that you could focus on, or you could contemplate and draw out, or some way of thinking about them that would not disturb your mind. So when we're thinking about a person or a situation with inappropriate attention, or when we're thinking about them in a way that disturbs our mind, this is what's called inappropriate attention. So anger always has this tendency to sort of ruminate, to chew on things, to turn them over in our mind, to remember, to look at the situation again and again and again. We can be angry about something that nobody else really noticed, that nobody else was disturbed, but something about that just really got me, and we're still hanging on to it. And you can think back to things that made you angry when you were a child. We have this amazing power of memory. We actually have no shortage of memory in general. So, but as I mentioned, the example of a hot coal, if you're holding a hot coal, what would you do? Drop it. that would be my first reaction. Just drop it. So if you're holding on to a state of mind that is making your mind, that's continuing to make your mind unhappy, continuing to make you feel unfortunate, make you feel like a victim of something, to make you feel like you have a wish to harm others and so forth, that is like a burning coal in your heart. And the best response is to just drop it. Now, anger, as with most of these minds, it has a life of its own. It has a mind of its own. It has a momentum of its own. So it's not necessarily quite as easy as just saying, okay, drop it, right? So the first step in tackling, and all of this falls under the umbrella of patience. So patience is a mind that is like an armor that protects your mind against anger and other disturbed states of mind, like jealousy, and enables you to endure difficulties with a happy mind. The definition of patience is a mind that happily endures difficult conditions, having given up the thought that things should be other than as they are. So patience is a mind that happily endures difficult conditions, having given up the thought that things should be other than as they are. Which implies, if we take that backwards, implies that when there's anger and a lot of these other minds, there's always some mind that thinks things should be other than how they were. They shouldn't have said that. That shouldn't have happened. Well, it did. And there's something in our mind that wants to hold on to a version of the world that is that's pleasant for us. But that world doesn't exist. A world that is perfectly the way we want it, where everybody's doing exactly what we want. That world doesn't exist unless somehow we've changed unless we can really change and transform our mind to. The only way you could ever possibly live in a world where you were comfortable all the time is to practice patience, is to have patience all the time, because the world is like living in a thorn bush where every time you move, there's other thorns that poke into you. There's always going to be things in our experience that are like thorns poking us, discomforts, unpleasant things, people. And if, and that's always going to be the way it is, because even when we solve one sort of problems, like new problems come or our expectations change. And I saw a brief flash of a news article about King Louis of France and Versailles, and how there's not a single bathroom in Versailles, no toilets. We've come to take for granted a lot of these amazing modern conveniences, and we would. So we, our expectations increase over time, and anyway, and because of our expectations not being fulfilled, we become unhappy easily. So our unhappiness arises when our wishes are not fulfilled. So this link between encountering something unpleasant and then becoming unhappy, that specifically, our unhappiness comes because our wishes are not fulfilled. So unhappiness is a mental state, whereas the pinprick in your arm is a physical feeling. If it causes you unhappiness, that's a mental state. And these things cause us unhappiness when our wishes are moving in a different direction from what we feel we're experiencing, when we want things to be other than as they are. So we give up the mind that wishes things to be other than as they are. That doesn't mean we give up the mind wishing the future to be different. It doesn't mean we give up the mind wanting to work for some better circumstance, but it means we have to accept where we are right now. And with that acceptance, that opens the possibility for patience, which is happily accepting any difficult conditions, because there will always be difficult conditions, as I've mentioned. So patience is like an armor. It said that, we need to wear the armor of patience that allows us to endure difficulties, go through our life without allowing those difficulties to make us unhappy. And we can see the power of being able to do that. If we could navigate life without difficult conditions making us unhappy, that's like a superpower. So all of these disturbed minds, like anger, they arise from inappropriate attention, from paying attention to things in such a way that focuses only on the negative qualities, draws them out, and in fact exaggerates those negative qualities, in the sense that we stop perceiving anything else, and we think that those negative qualities just are in that person, right? We don't recognize that there may have been many circumstances leading that person to say and do what they did. We don't recognize the things that we may have done to trigger that, or the underlying beliefs that they had that might have led them to act or do something that we found unpleasant. So we tend to just focus on whatever was seeming to be unpleasant. We think it really is unpleasant, and we think the only way we can be happy is if we get rid of it. And that's where this mind of wishing to harm comes in. So that full maturation of anger is this mind wishing to harm or get rid of whatever it is that we find to be unpleasant. And under the influence of anger, even normally reasonable people will say very unreasonable things, right? So if we think about if there have been times when we've spoken under the influence of anger, it's often not the most skillfully chosen words, and people are really good at noticing that. Like there can be subtle barbs and arrows of speech that are weaponizing our speech. And people can notice that, right? People have that sensitivity to where people are, where we're speaking or acting out of anger. So anger robs us of our peace of mind is the first casualty. It makes our mind unpeaceful, makes our mind unhappy. And it also robs us of our good sense and our judgment, our prudence in how we act. There is, one of my teachers says, there is nothing that an uncontrolled mind isn't capable of, right? Or an uncontrolled mind is capable of anything. So if we think about all of the, heinous, evil actions that have been done through history, how many of them have been motivated by anger, right? Just people who've lost control, killing their loved ones, just losing their jobs, saying something very unskillful, damaging relationships on a more mild level, right? Damaging friendships, causing people to be afraid of us. So when we're angry, people tend to avoid us. So somebody who's constantly angry, even their face comes to look a little bit unpleasant. It's like, you just know that person's a little prickly. You kind of want to avoid them. So, it said that from patience comes beauty. So someone who can be patient all the time, there's a natural beauty that arises. So just in conclusion, I wanted to mention that, as I said, it's not always easy to just drop anger. Sometimes you can if it's mild, but if it's something that's been going on for a long time, you need to be skillful in how you approach it. And the way to approach anger skillfully is, first of all, just to acknowledge it. Like, if it's there, just acknowledge it. Because there's a sense in which we all want to deny that there's anything, unsavory or harmful in our mind. But just acknowledging when there's anger in our mind is very, very powerful. That alone takes some peace of mind. That's why practicing it in meditation, like in meditation, in a peaceful space, bringing to mind where is there anger in our mind, that's very helpful. In meditation, bringing to mind where is there jealousy in our mind, where is there craving, where is there greed, where is there pretentiousness, etc. Noticing these things, it's just, you can notice them in a very even, neutral way. Like, just, look at that. No big surprise. We're humans, right? We're humans. Humans have anger. So if we can notice it, that's the first step. Then having a wish to abandon it. Again, not thinking that things should be other than as they are. Okay, I'm angry. Apparently, that's the way things are right now. Not thinking things should be other than as we are, not getting angry at ourselves because we're angry. Even using some skill in our wording and how we think about it, not thinking that we're angry, just noticing there is anger in our mind. This subtle difference between we are angry, we're an angry person, and we're a person with strong habits of anger. There's anger in our mind. A little bit of gap there, a little bit of distance. And then beginning to think about the faults of anger, like how it's like a burning coal that makes us unhappy, can cause us to appear unattractive, frightening to others, cause us to act in unskillful ways. Contemplating these faults of anger can help give us a wish to abandon it. And then we can just begin to think about the other person, whoever it was that made us angry or makes us angry. Think about them in a different way. Recognize that other people could see that person in a different way. They could see that situation in a different way. They could, there's things that we can learn from difficult situations. Difficulties don't have to make us unhappy. Difficulties can be a way of helping us to practice patience, actually, as a reminder to practice patience. Okay, so in the last couple of minutes, what we can do is just to conclude by holding some of this in our minds. We can again take a meditation for just a couple of minutes. We take a deep breath in and out just to reset a bit. And we can think the first step to dealing with anger or any other disturbing mind is just to acknowledge them, just to accept and notice if they're present in our mind or when they're present in our mind. Whatever negative states of mind there are, they will all proceed through our mind at some point. We will have all of these negative minds, negative tendencies, disturbed states. The key is for us to notice them. If we can notice anger, we can reflect on how it harms ourselves, harms us, harms others, and develop a wish to be free from this burning coal of anger. And we can recognize that there are many, many ways to overcome anger, but all of them are grouped under this category of patience. Patience, just developing a peaceful mind that can happily accept difficult conditions, having given up the thought that things should be other than as they are. And finally, we can think, just imagining the power. What if we were able to move through our life with utter patience, accepting happily any difficult conditions, working to improve situations with a mind that was not disturbed by difficulties? And with this vision of being able to navigate life with patience, free from anger, helping others to become free from anger, we can carry this vision and this determination to overcome anger as we rise from meditation.